Okay. So we know that string is the most used class in Java, but the strings are mutable, means they cannot be changed. Means once you define the string object, it will allocate the memory. So if you have to change the value in the string, so it will allocate new string. So the using of when you are changing the strings constantly, so it is advisable to go with string buffer instead of string. So string buffer will allocate the space in memory when you create the string, and it will allocate more buffer, so that when you change the value in the string, it will not create new object location, and it will not create anything new. It will extend to the value in the memory. So the main difference is strings cannot, the value in the string you can change variable, but internally it will allocate it in a new location. It will create a new string object and it will create the reference to that. But in case of string buffer, it will not create the new object internally. It will change the value in the existing reference. So that is the only difference. So we have used string in many places. So string has so many methods. So you can check for a substring, or you can check contains, or you can create a substring. You can get a substring of a string using the method substring. So the index will start from 0. So the index of G is 0. So I wanted to get the string only morning. So I don't want to get good. So I can give the index of M. So that is 5. So I will run this program. So this method returns, okay, it contains good. So it will return the boolean that is true. So substring, I wanted to get only morning from this string. So I can use substring. So there are so many string manipulation operations are available as a part of string class. So you can go through all of them in your free time. So the index of will return you the position of a particular string. Suppose I wanted to get the index of the string morning. So the index of string morning is 5. So if I give the string that is not available as a part of it, I will give morning, evening. So it will return -1. So if the required string is not found in a given string, so it will return -1. So when you change the value of string to different thing, so it will create new object in memory. So but the string buffer you can append. So it has printed. So I have created string buffer. So I have appended good and I have appended evening. So it will point to the same object reference and it will append the strings. So you can concatenate the strings using plus operator. Or you can use append for concatenation of multiple strings in string buffer. If we are using string, you can use plus operator for concatenating of multiple strings. So the strings that we are defining directly in double quotes without the string object, those are called string literals. So we have concatenated good morning and good evening. So like this, there are so many string manipulation operations. If you wanted to get the character at position with index, you can get the character at that position. So there are so many methods available. Replace particular some value in the string. Split the string into multiple strings. Suppose if I wanted to split the good morning with space, so it will return me the string array. So the first part will, so this is the space, on this we have splitted the string. The first part contains the, so you can go to before SCR of 0. So if array index 0 you will have the good and array index 1 you will have morning. So you have splitted the string into multiple string elements using the split method. So like this you have so many useful methods available in string. So why I am explaining all these methods in string is, so this is the most used one, and so to compare two strings normally, so A double equal to is the operation for comparison. For comparing strings, you should use dot equals method. So you cannot use for comparing string because string is object, it is not primitive type. So primitive types are integer, character and real. For those primitive types you can use double equal to operator, but for the string you need to use the equals method. So the equals method will return boolean whether it is true or false, whether s the value in the s equals good or not. So you can go through all the list of available methods in the documentation. Enum. So we will see what is enum. So like we have primitive data types like we have classes, we are defining a template of object, so that is also we are using as a data type. So you are creating the variable of type class. Similarly you are creating variable of type interface. So in the similar section you can create a variable of type enum. So enum is a type that you are defining with a predefined set of values. So here we have seen the class and interface. So we can define the type enum day. So here you can give a predefined set of values. So you can, in your program, you can create a variable of type day. So for this variable you can only assign the values that you are defined in the enum type. So for this variable you can assign only values Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. So here we have defined the type day. So it will accept only values, these three values. So we have declared here the variable of type day, and we can, so you cannot assign any other values, strings. So it will give you the error. So you can define the constructors in the enum type like the class. So here we have defined this type and constructor. So I wanted to set the predefined values Sunday, Monday and Tuesday. So if I wanted to get the conversion of string of this, so while creating the object, I am giving the string value of it. So this is all like any other class you are defining. You can define the functions and constructors. Now I can get the string value of day. So the string value sun is printed for Sunday. So like this you can define a data type with restricted values and behavior. So is that clear, Enum? Yeah. So the typecasting can be used for changing the type of the value. Here in the list we are storing the objects. So I have added a value of type string. So I can change the type of, I added the object of type string to the list, but internally it will be converted to object and it will be stored. So but when I am getting it, so it doesn't know because it is a string, because we are storing the type with object. So while getting it you should change to typecast. Here I can store need not be string, I can store the type. It is not restricted with one data type. So in the older versions of Java, all the collections used to store objects types. So if I get the value from here, I need to again typecast it to So here we are storing different types of values. Here I am storing the type D value, day value, and here I am storing the string. So that is not a good approach. So because when a collection you should store, in a collection you should store elements of same type. So if you wanted to store elements of different type, you can create the collection with object type. So to solve this problem, they have given the data type that will be stored in a class, in a collection. So how it is implemented? So I have created a class sample. So here I can define the data types that it can accept. So the type, you can use T, or you can use any letter with caps. It need not be T or H or S. So you can use normally general uses for specifying the type. We will use T, and you can create a variable of type. Yeah, you can use this T referring to the data type that is passed. So I am just defining a class which will store the value of some type, and it will return me the value of that type. Now when you are defining a variable of type that class, so I need to define what type of value that I wanted to store over here. So I wanted to pass string str sample. So normally how we will write program if we wanted to store a particular value in an object and get that value from that object. So we will just write with data type. We don't use this. I will just give you the other example. So this class we can store only string data types. So if I wanted to provide the same behavior and functionality for the different class or different type of variable or different type of data. So I need to define one more class for that. Suppose if I wanted to define for the day type, so I need to create one more class. In the similar fashion, so which will take the parameter of type. So here we have defined the same behavior. Here we are for storing the strings. We have defined the constructor with, and similarly we are getting the value of the string. For storing the day value, so we have defined the class the day and we are getting the value of the day. So for one more data type we might have to define one more class. So to avoid this data type dependency, so you can go with generics. So I am defining a class with generic type. So here I can specify while creating the constructor or while creating the instance of this class, I can specify the type of the value that we are going to store. So now here we are storing strings. Similarly, I can create sample class of type day. So here I have used the same sample class for storing the types string and day. So I did not define two different classes like this for storing different values, because in case where you are the place where you are using the data type, so you will be replaced with special symbol called data type T, or you can use H or anything. And you can use wherever you are using the data type reference, there you can use that T value. So this is the generalized of data type. So they call it as generics. So you can abstract the type of the data using like this kind of generics. So they have used all these generics in the collections implementation. Suppose if you are creating a hash table, so they have defined K and V, K for key and V for value. So what is the data type of the key you have to specify here? It can be string, and the value data type is day, I can say. So here we have defined hash table which will store the strings as keys and days as values. Similarly for list also, so they have defined E as element types. So you can specify what are the type of elements that you wanted to store. So is that clear? Generics. So annotations gives specific directions to the compiler about the class. Here we are specified that this method is overridden from the superclass. Suppose the superclass has the method withdraw. So in the subclass, so I am overriding the implementation of the method. So there is, so to define that, I am specifying the override annotation. Suppose if I add override, if I define some other method, so if I add override, so it will say error because this is not the method that is implemented or it is inherited from the superclass. So you cannot override the method because that is not inherited. Similarly, there are some predefined annotations are available from Java. So those are like, so at the rate deprecated. So this annotation we will use for the methods to deprecate. Suppose you are providing a library, so you will provide so many methods and APIs. So if you wanted to deprecate the method and if you wanted to provide the new implementation of that method, you can use the deprecated annotation, so that compiler, so whenever you are accessing this method from this object, so you will see this kind of, so if you see this is strike through on the method, means this is deprecated. So you are not supposed to use this, so you should use a different so you are not supposed to use this method. So I can say suppress. So I will define a variable of type int. So if I don't use it anywhere, but I require it somehow in my program, so I can suppress those kind of warnings. Suppress all unused. So because here I did not declare this variable of type integer and I did not use it anywhere. So when I compile this program, I will get the warning saying that. So if I don't, so here I am getting warning saying that the value of the local variable is not used. So I wanted to suppress all the warnings of type unused. So I can use the annotation suppress warnings and unused. So this kind of directions that you can give to the compiler using annotations, and annotations will define the metadata about your program. So in the program, so you can specify some metadata or metadata information, and similarly these are all annotations that are available by default with Java at the rate deprecated, suppress warnings, and at the rate documented. and override. So these are four are available by default with Java. So if you want, you can define your own annotation. New annotation. So for defining annotation, you will use @interface. This is also a kind of type we define enum class like that. So you will have the same name with of annotation with the file name, and you will use @interface for defining the annotation. And in annotation, you can use string and only primitive data types. You cannot use other classes. So for this annotation other, I can pass the attribute name. So default is empty. I can specify default, or I can ignore the default. So when you define an annotation, it can be applicable to either a variable declaration or a class declaration or a method declaration. So you can, so how can I define this, the scope of this annotation? So I can, there is a target annotation, you can use applicable element type dot method. So I can use this other annotation applicable to either class, or I can do for annotation field, local variable, method, type. So for now we will go with method. So in my class I can define the annotation @other name John. So this is saying the metadata information. So the name John person has implemented this method, or any other directions. So you can read this annotation in runtime also, not only for the compilation. So if you wanted to make this annotations are initially designed for compilation time, later they were extended to runtime. So if you wanted to extend this annotation available to runtime, so you can say there is something called retention. So you can say retention policy dot runtime, so that you can access this annotation in runtime for this method. So but the by default annotations are used for defining the metadata about the metadata information about the class. So this is widely used feature in the recent Java libraries or frameworks implementations. So people are defining annotations for specifying the information about the method they are implementing. Suppose in the next advanced Java sessions you will be going through web services. So for defining a method as a web service, you will use notation of web service. So it's a web method. So this kind of annotations specify that okay, this method is exposed as a web service. Like that, annotations are used to define the metadata about the program. So you can define your own annotations and you can read them at runtime for the execution purposes also. So the annotations can be inherited to the, so if you define the annotation is inherited, so all the subclasses of the class that you have defined, so they also gets the annotation inherited. So when you query your classes through annotation, so you will get the subclass references also. So initially I don't want to cover these topics, but I just wanted to give brief introduction and understanding of this. So that is all about annotations. How can I debug my Java program from Eclipse? So we have this test.java. So I wanted to debug. So if I wanted to debug this kind of Java program, so I can put debug. So line breakpoint. So you can right click on a line and you can define it as a breakpoint. So till now we are running it as a Java application using run. So there is a debug. So you can debug it as a this is for debug, this icon you can use. Normally we used to have it in the menu. There is an option called debug. So somehow we don't see it here. So this icon you can use for debugging. So you can select the class that you wanted to debug. So when you are debugging, it's asking you to change to debugging perspective in Eclipse. So you can change it. So when you change it to debugging perspective, so here you see the green line. So the execution of the program is currently paused at this line. So here you can see the stack trace. Stack trace means, so what is the calling function? From where this is called, you can see the stack trace over here. So this is step into and step over. So if you wanted to go inside the function, so you can use the step into. So if you wanted to go to the next line of execution, you can go to step over. So if you want to continue the execution, so if you want to continue the execution to the next breakpoint, you can use this. And if you wanted to stop debugging or terminate the program, you can use this. So normally you can use step into means F5 and step over you can use F6. So F6 it will go to the next line. Here if you see the value of here window, you can show view. So you can see the variables. So it will show you the view of the variables. So here it is showing the value in A is 10. So I will go to the next step. So the variable value B is created. So the value in B is 23. So I will go to the next. So the variable value C is created. The value in C is 33. So like this I can go to the next line. So here I wanted to go into this get value function. So instead of going to step over, I will go to step into. So then what? It has gone to the class sample and the get value function. So here the variables section, you can see the reference of the current function or current class. So here if you see the stack trace, so from the main method we got into the class sample class get value method. So again I will go back and so the program is ended with the result C33. So other values got printed. So like this you can debug the Java program. So once debug is over, so this is the debug perspective. You can change from debug perspective to the Java perspective and you can see this. So if you again want to switch the debug perspective, you can switch to debug perspective. So this icon you can use for starting the debug again. So it will start at the next debug point. So if you want to continue to the other debug point, you can add a debug point and you can run. So then it will execute all the steps after the present debug point and it will get stopped at the next debug point. You can have multiple debug points in a program. So this is how you can debug the Java program, and the variable section you can see the value of the variables, or if you keep the mouse over on a variable, so on a separate window it will show the value of the variable. So this is how you can debug the Java program. So this is the last session. So tomorrow onwards you will be started with advanced Java.